Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dave. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So you work at Mattel. I have to ask you this question. In 2023, Barbie blew up. I know offline you mentioned that you weren't a part of that marketing campaign, but from
True.
your point of view, like it had to have been a surprise.
There were things that about it that I think we expected, and I think there were things that kind of took it by storm. I think that from the cultural relevancy, if you look at where Barbie had been, especially through the lens of diversity and inclusion, and just really being very topical and very in line with cultural conversations, Barbie has done an amazing job of that over the past few years. But the cultural conversation that completely, the wave that swept across the country, the pink wave in Pantone Color 219C, of course. And that comes from somebody who doesn't work on Barbie, but everybody knows that Pantone chip, that's the Barbie pink, right? So, the wave that swept across the country and the momentum beyond the theatrical. It's one thing to say, okay, the box office was fabulous, and Barbie and Oppenheimer. Obviously, there's a lot of noise around those two movies coming out at the same time. But the continued cultural conversation around Barbie is something that from someone who definitely has some stake in that game from a Mattel perspective. I've been really impressed with how well the team's been able to sustain the excitement and the conversation around Barbie.
Unbelievable. I'm assuming you know people on that team. Like, did you
Oh
pick
yeah.
their brains about it?
Yeah, in my role, I work on the U.S. commercial side, and so the Barbie team is right across the hallway. One of my old managers is the vice president on the Dolls team, so we chat fairly often, and there's always conversations around, oh, how did you approach this, or how did you structure that? Because one of the things that's interesting about developing a line around a movie is when you have something like Barbie that's been in market for since 1959, Barbara Millicent Roberts. That's when Ruth Handler brought Barbie first to market, right? So, to have that kind of through line on Barbie, but then you have this moment in time with the movie. How do you balance that from a toy perspective? And how much do you want specific to the movie that's
Mm.
really more of a cultural conversation than it is something that's going to sell a lot of toys like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Super Mario or in my world Jurassic World. Those are very okay, there's a tight what we call show to shelf connection in terms of what you see in the movie is what you're going to see on shelf from a toy perspective. But for Barbie, they didn't do a very large theatrical line of product. There were certainly items, and those items did very well. But I think one of the things that really helped Barbie is that the cultural noise swept across the entire brand. So as a result, the whole brand lifted up. So that was really fun to see.
Unbelievable. I'm a bit of a marketing nerd. So when I saw Barbie and I saw you were coming on the show, Mattel, I'm like, okay, I got to ask Dave. Okay. So, Dave, let's talk about your specific role. What do you do at Mattel?
A lot of people ask me that, including the people I work with. What is it that you actually do here? So my role is U.S. market. So my job is basically to take the line of toys that our teams, that our designers and engineers have worked so thoughtfully on, and figure out how to bring them into the U.S. market. And that's a few things. First off, it's pricing the line. So obviously, you want to figure out what the retail price will be for the consumer. Make sure that that's the right value proposition. If a toy is worth $20, we won't charge 30. We also won't charge 10 because we also need to make sure that we're setting the retailers up, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Amazons, etc. So having lots of conversations with them in terms of the distribution and what items would go to which accounts. And then also, the fun side is, demand generation, which is a fancy way of saying like, how do we get kids and collectors excited about the toys that we're bringing to market so that they know about them and understand what makes these toys so special?
Unbelievable. So, what specific lines of product do you work with?
So I work across the action figures and plush portfolio. So I've got a few examples behind me, but for podcast listeners, close your eyes and imagine. So a lot of it is entertainment properties such as Toy Story and Pixar with Disney. We do WWE wrestlers. We do Minecraft, top selling video game of all time. And then Jurassic World dinosaurs, of course, that's another big one for us. We
Mm.
also have some of our own IP, intellectual property, and that's He-Man Masters of the Universe for those children of the 80s to see He-Man and Skeletor. There you go, back in action. So I have a Castle Grayskull over my shoulder here, just out of camera, but that was a fun
Um,
one to bring back. And when people find out that I work at Mattel, there's usually a question on, so how does that discount work? And Castle Grayskull usually comes up in that conversation once they find out about
I
Motion. So
I love it. Like, how did you get there? Like, what was your path to Mattel?
So my path was a little different than the standard path. So I can kind of walk you through what I do, and then I'll give you a more typical
Okay,
example.
sure.
But mine came about through a career shift, not necessarily from a straight line path. So, it's funny because I was listening to an earlier episode of the Ultimate Fun Jobs podcast with Jay Onrait, and that was my original path. Is I wanted to go into sports broadcasting, so I did that
No
throughout my
way.
20s. Yeah, and so I worked at Fox Sports for a little bit. Didn't overlap with Jay. I would moved on to other opportunities by the time he landed there. But he mentioned that it's a lifestyle, and you guys talked about how that's a grind at times, and you can get burnt out. And I got to be 30, and I got married, and Jay mentioned going into work at 6 p.m. and my wife's a school teacher, which meant working Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was not very conducive to
Mhm.
what I had wanted out of my life. So, okay, what am I going to do when I grow up, right? So, what landed the big pivot for me was understanding if I went back to school and I got a master's degree, that would allow me the opportunity to take a step back and explore those other paths and understand what do I want to do? What do I not want to do? What are the skills that I have that I can leverage? And what are the new things that I need to know? Because when I went to business school, I had never done PowerPoints. The only time I used Excel was making a grocery list. So I really had to start from scratch from there. But I did
Wow.
find a lot of my skills were transferable. And I think if we talk a little bit later on about, trying to explore different industries and understand a path within a career, understanding what your towering strengths are and what you do well will take people very far. And I think that's something that coming out of business school allowed me the opportunity to explore, okay, what are the corporate structures where I'm really going to shine? And so I spent some time in Sony Electronics, and it wasn't a good cultural fit for me. I love presenting. Some of that is the sports broadcasting background, but also I love the sound of my own voice, so there's that too. But going over to Mattel, that was when I was interviewing for that spot in the marketing department 10 years ago. I talked to them about this is what I do well. And you can put me in front of a buyer, and you can put me in front of a room of two people, you can put me in front of a room of 200 people. And this is where, this is the background I had, the experience I have doing this. And so for Mattel, really been able to hit the ground running. I've been lucky to work for some great managers that have allowed me the autonomy and the chance to grow my career and do different things in different places. But that's kind of the big step for me in changing my career was going to business school and getting that degree and understanding a little bit more of the business acumen, the fundamentals of business. And then from there, it was what drew me to marketing was a combination of the creative storytelling. And then I'm also kind of a numbers guy. So, I grew up collecting baseball cards, pouring through box scores, all that good stuff. And so that art and science is something that I really love about marketing. It's one of my favorite parts of the job.
Dave, listen, man, pivoting is scary. So
It's
listen,
terrifying.
kudos to you, man. A lot of people, okay, they're pushing 30, they were going along a path, and they're like, whoa, this doesn't fit anymore. What do I need to do now? So for you to just take that moment, okay, so this is the situation. Okay, what do I need to do? Where are my interests? Where are my skills, my strengths? See, Dave, a lot of people don't do the personal inventory of their skills. What the heck are you good at? Like, write it down. People don't do that, but
Yeah.
you did, and you decided sports broadcasting wasn't the way to go, and you thought marketing was, and you took the time. You were able to, like, not everybody's able to go to school, go back to school, but you were
Yeah.
able
Very
to take
lucky to do
advantage
that.
of that. So good on you, man. Not everyone could do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I took baby steps. The first thing I did when I left sports broadcasting wasn't to fill out a business school application. I started by going to community college and taking an accounting class because I thought, well, I like numbers, maybe I would like accounting. And the first part of that statement was true. I do like numbers, but I do have a little bit of an accounting acumen. But at the same time, it's not something I was really passionate about. It wasn't a way for me to capitalize on the things that I like to do and I do well. I also spent some time working for the Los Angeles Sparks, the WNBA, working in their finance department. Again, trying to see like, okay, is there an overlay with sports that would still appeal to me? And yeah, I liked it, but again, it's ultimately it comes back to the same work-life balance. And that the anchors in my life in my 20s were different than the anchors in my life, my 30s, and now my 40s. So I think that's something that being able to take that inventory, as you mentioned, David, is something that is easier said than done. But it's an exercise that will pay back many times over in terms of a return.
And I like how you were fearless. Like you did the trial and error. Man, like I've had to pivot in my career. I know my ego got in there because I used to be a TV reporter on camera, right? So you're like, I was up here. Now I got to go down there. So there's a part of you that, you had to say goodbye to the ego. Like, because let's face it, sports is glamorous, sports media,
Absolutely.
right? But
Mhm.
yeah, like good on you. You kick the ego aside and you decided, listen, man, like that road, like that door's closed. You got to go elsewhere.
Yeah, it's funny. You go from being at the holiday party and you're catching up with friends you haven't talked to in a while. And yeah, when you're working in sports broadcasting, you can't wait for that question to come up. You're like, yeah, what do you do now? Like, oh, this old thing. And then it was, well, I'm working minimum wage. And I'm trying to figure out how I can get off of unemployment and understand how to, build something entirely new. And obviously I couldn't have done that without my wife and my family. And I'm very lucky to have been able to discover some opportunities along the way. So it's, as you said, it's very scary, but ultimately when you invest in yourself and you take that inventory and you take that time to understand, okay, what is it that I want to do, but also what is it that I don't want to do? Because sometimes process of elimination is just as helpful as well.
Huge. Agreed. So, okay, you work at Mattel. Now, when I think of working at a toy company, I think of the movie Big. I think Tom Hanks playing with the toys, getting paid to do it. Do you play with the toys? I know you're a grown man. You're a grown ass man. I get it. But do you play with any of these toys?
I don't know what you're talking about, Dave. Yeah, no, I'm playing with a little squishy Miles Morales plush, and sometimes they do have to take the toys away from me because I will start fidgeting with them a little too much during meetings. But yeah, if you look at the company logo in the company Big in the movie Big, it looks a lot like the Mattel logo. Just throwing it out there, but
Uh-oh.
yeah, I mean that movie actually has kind of rung true in a couple different ways, from some of the meetings and one of my favorite parts is the product development meeting where they're talking about skyscrapers turning into robots, and it's like, who wants to play with a skyscraper? And so, luckily, our design team comes up with awesome concepts, and whether it's fearsome dinosaurs or cuddly little fox plush behind me, it's always an adventure at Mattel looking at these toys.
Oh my goodness. Tell me a day in your life in this role because this is cool. You're playing with these toys, you're talking to movers and shakers in the toy biz as well as other like major companies. Like you're doing licensing deals with major people. So what's a day in the life like?
There's areas where we can be proactive and okay, I know what's going to happen, and there's other areas where you just need to react to what's happening around you and do it quickly. And that's something obviously coming from broadcasting, Dave, I'm sure you can relate to that the need to be quick on your toes and nimble. But some of it is email answering, of course, and meetings, and we'll talk to a lot of different stakeholders. Some are inside Mattel, and as you mentioned, with licensors, some are outside. So if we're talking to Universal and understanding, okay, when is the Jurassic World, Netflix content coming? Or, okay, Minecraft has announced a movie. Ooh, all right, let's find out a little bit more about that. And,
Cool.
some of those details that are coming up. And then, if it's working internally, sometimes it's talking to finance and saying, hey, we were going to price the toy here, but now we need to make it over here. So these are the trade-offs that we're going to make sure that we're still profitable at the end of the day. And then working with the product teams and with our sales teams. And it's we like to think of ourselves as kind of the hub and the central of the wheel. So there's a lot of different spokes. And so those meetings and those touch points are with a lot of other stakeholders. So got to make sure from a communication standpoint, again, there's places where I can be proactive and set those weekly status check-ins. Okay, is everything going okay? Nothing's on fire. Okay, great. And there's other times where somebody will hand you a burning trash can and say, okay, you need to go fix this. So, okay, let me break out the fire extinguisher.
Right. It sounds like every day is like a new thing. There's never like a boring day around there.
If it's boring, that's the most dangerous kind of day, Dave, because it's funny that happened to us a couple weeks ago where, everybody's just coming back from break and looking around and there's no meetings on the calendar and emails are pretty slow. And it's like that moment in, like a Jurassic World movie where, okay, there's a raptor around the corner somewhere. Like, what's going to happen? And sure enough, three things happen at the same time. It's like, oh, okay, this is what I was expecting. So, so every day is a little bit of an adventure, but some of it is also being able to prioritize and have time management skills to ensure that you have enough time to do everything in a day. Because as a former manager once told me, if all you're doing is answering emails, then all you're doing is solving other people's problems. And that's important, but chances are you have some of your own problems that you need to solve and trying to look forward. And so that's where some of the other, time management skills come into place, whether it's blocking time on a calendar or, making sure that you have, a day without meetings or whatever that trick is to kind of make sure that you can be at your productive best. And then again, take inventory of the timing and in areas of your life where you do well. I drink coffee every day for sure, but I'm also my most productive between about 9 and 11 in the morning. So I know, okay, that's my creative superpower time. So I try to block that time in the morning if I have large projects I need to work on, as opposed to if I have status check-ins that are kind of business as usual, you can do those in the afternoon.
Got it. So, all right, say there's a new Jurassic World movie coming, all right? And you got to do the toy line thing, like Mattel jumps into action. Take me through that process. How do you work with, I think it's Universal with Jurassic Park.
Got it.
Like,
Yep.
Take me through that process of how you're involved in that.
Sure. So I'll talk about the Mattel process and then my role within the Mattel process. So from a toy development standpoint, that's really our product team that will do that. So we'll have designers and engineers, and some of our product team will meet directly with Universal. They'll read the script. They'll see different iterations of the film as it comes to life. Previously at Mattel, I worked on the Cars team when they introduced Cars 3. So we got to see a couple of screenings. It's really fun to see, like, especially in animation, you see the pencil sketches that then become the cartoon. And that kind of thing. So, the animatics, and you see that process of these things come to life. And so during that process, they'll tell you, Universal will say, okay, these are the species of dinosaurs that will be in the film. And then ultimately what we want is the film reference, which is, okay, how's it going to look in the movie? Because again, as I mentioned, show to shelf is pretty important for us. So some of the toys, it's more important than others. If we're designing a younger aged toy line, excuse me, and it's more of a inspired by, as opposed to this fearsome dinosaur that might have just sink its teeth into its prey, then for a 3-year-old maybe we have that be more of a smiley moment than a snarly moment. But for those types of instances, we're working with Universal to understand what the toys are, how they're going to look, and then ultimately we can get those 3D renderings from the film, again, especially for things that are CGI, like a Jurassic World dinosaur or other things. And then from our side, what we look to do is, okay, as we design the overall line architecture of all the toys we're going to sell, how are the different segments coming together? And so there's our core scale of dinosaurs, and that's going to be maybe 2/3 of the line. But then we're also going to have electronic innovation, and maybe there's a dinosaur where you pull the leg back and it lets out a mighty roar, or there's a small simple fidget toy that's $5, but you press down the back of his head and he snaps down his teeth. And those are examples that are currently in the line, but gives you a sense. We also have our giant super colossals, which are 5 feet long dinosaurs that are absolutely enormous. And so as we're putting all these different pieces of the puzzle together, we then do this at a retail level, which is where I come in. I take that product line and then we say, okay, Walmart, on your shelves is going to be 4 feet from left to right, and it's going to be nothing but Jurassic World dinosaurs. So
Mm.
we're going to put the smaller ones here. We're going to put the medium-sized ones down here. Then the ones that the kid really going to want, the super colossal, put that right at that 4-year-old's eye level when they're walking into shelf. So a little bit of a trick of the trade there, Dave, is to make sure you understand the eye line of where your consumer will be, and then the product that you really want them to buy, that's the one that you put at their eye line. And then
All right.
from the parent's perspective,
Right.
want to make sure you got the right item for them too. So a lot of this has to do with, we have space insights team that help us manage kind of how consumers walk the aisle and how they shop. All those insights inform the way that we bring the product to market and the way we set it up for accounts. So for something like for a Jurassic World theatrical, the volume is going to be a lot bigger, but the line expands as a result of that. So we'll have, maybe if we had 4 feet of space, and then for the movie, we might ask for 6 feet of space. And we'll prove it out with numbers and like I said, the art and the science behind it. And we'll come up with products that are only available at Walmart or only available at Target, so that the retailer has a reason to really lean in and sell more toys than they otherwise would.
Okay, this is great how you're taking us behind the scene here. Okay, so you're telling me Mattel goes, "Yo, Walmart, we got the toys. Here's how you're going to place them on your shelves." So it's not them, it's you guys with those instructions.
We make a recommendation, of course.
Okay, got it.
So worth
Right.
noting that Walmart has something they call the layout center in Bentonville.
Okay.
And usually they don't let other people into the layout center for two reasons. Number one, there's competitive products. So, if we were to look and we were to say, oops, I knocked that toy over from a competitor, we would never, Dave. But that's where they will go out and draw what they call their modular or their mod. And so that's kind of, again, they look at it in 4-foot increments, and they'll say, okay, here's how I'm going to put all the toys together. And then they will tell us when they give us the awards for the item,
Mm.
meaning, okay, these are the dinosaurs that we're going to put on our shelves. They'll say, okay, I'm going to take these 6. I'm not going to take this one. I don't want that one. This one I want to look like this instead of that, whatever the feedback is. And then we take that back, and then we kind of set it up on our side. And I'll save the supply chain item setup details for the follow up podcast episode. The not quite as fun jobs, but in terms of the conversations with Walmart, we bring them into the Mattel offices. We have a big showroom where we put all the toys up on the shelves and everything, and we have some fun. We play some demo videos to get them to understand the background of the brand. We'll have people from, if it's a licensed brand like a Universal or a Disney, we'll bring them in to give a power of the brand franchise to kind of, amp up the excitement. And then we talk through the toys and what makes them so special.
Nice. Love it. So, Dave, tell me some of the skills. Okay. All right. Say I'm a kid coming out of school, or maybe, middle-aged person at a crossroads in their career, and they want to get in to a role similar to yours, or marketing, toys, whatever. What kind of skills do they need?
So there's sharp skills, quantitative skills, but there's also soft skills, and you're going to need both in marketing, and whether that's working for Mattel or any other CPG, consumer packaged goods industry. The hard skills, I know it's boring, but PowerPoint and Excel, that's kind of the fundamentals of the business. And what that will allow you to do is the Excel is the quantitative business analysis. And certainly there's other tools other than Excel, but that's the default one that most companies use. And so what that's going to allow you to do is to look at data and then draw actionable insights. Meaning, okay, if I'm looking at how people are buying our toys and we're looking at point of sale, POS data, okay, the POS is up, the POS is down. Well, why? And then what do I do with that information? And so being able to draw those business insights based off of data, that's a very valuable skill in marketing. That's a big piece of what we do at Mattel, is to make sure that we're making, actionable data-driven insights. The PowerPoint piece comes in because there's also a narrative storytelling aspect to it as well. And you want to be able to communicate your ideas effectively and clearly to different audiences. And that's something where, when we meet with different accounts, every presentation is going to be a little bit different, not just because, oh, I got to put the Walmart logo on this one and the Target on that one, but the way that those retailers approach not just toys, but really selling all merchandise is very different. So always want to make sure that you're tailoring the speech or the presentation to your audience. So that ability to give the presentations. And again, that's where you're mixing the quantitative with the qualitative. That's all on the hard skill side. Then on the soft skills side, communication and flexibility and time management. Those are all really important skills because again, in a given day, you might have enough time to go through all of the email. You might have enough time to go to all the meetings, but maybe there's two or three other, side projects that are important but not urgent. And I had a boss once tell me, if you think about everything in a quadrant of what's important versus not important and urgent and not urgent, the important urgent stuff, that's easy to do. Like those are the things where you prioritize your time. Not important, not urgent. Okay, you can kind of let that one slide and you can just keep an eye on it, but it's fine. The real trick with productivity and being as efficient with your time as possible is to focus on the important, not urgent, instead of the urgent, not important. And trying to sift out those two things, it does take some experience, and it takes one or two runs through the laps around the track, so to speak. But if you have a good manager that can help you discern those things and be as efficient with your time, then I think that would really help. So those are some of the hard skills and the soft skills that I think are really beneficial. Again, not just in the Mattel ecosystem, but really across marketing.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So let's talk school. Okay, you talked about how you went back to business. You went to business school and stuff. So if I'm okay, so I'm at my pivot point. I'm like, okay, I want to work in marketing at a toy company. Do I need school? Is there any transferable way to like go lateral? Like, do I have to do schooling?
You don't. I will say the pay scale is a lot of times is based on education, but I'm a director level, and we have vice presidents at Mattel that did not go to business school because they have that practical experience. The advantage of going to business school is it's equivalent to say maybe 3, 4, 5 years of work experience. And so if you have that work experience, you can absolutely, supplement that MBA degree, those three letters at the end of your name. The advantage of education, again, is really about that chance to explore on your own what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean a six-figure investment in business school. That can be something as simple as, for me, it was going to Santa Monica College and signing up for 2 accounting classes to say, okay, what's this with all these numbers and assets, liabilities, and equity? Okay, all right, I understand that piece. And that was kind of the first step where I felt like, okay, I like this, but I need something a little bit more structured, a little bit more formalized. And again, because my background wasn't in traditional business, I did have to take some time to understand a little bit more of the underpinnings of how those things come together. But so it's not a must-have from an MBA perspective. There's definitely ways to supplement, especially, and that's a hefty investment, right? It's a bet on yourself, and it's an investment in yourself, but at the same time, like it's a bit of a luxury as well to be able to take that time. And I know a lot of people will get the job first and then do business school while they're working.
Sure.
Kudos to those people, by the way, because that is, talk about the importance of time management day. Like if you're doing school on top of work, like holy smokes, that's really impressive to be able to balance that many things at once. So, but yeah, so education for me, it was a transformative pivot moment. But I think for a lot of people, especially if they're on a little bit more of that linear path and they know, okay, I'm at point A, I know I want to get to point B. I think that's something that you can supplement with direct experience. But if not, I was in a position where because I was making a pivot at age 30, I didn't really want to go back down to the bottom of the corporate ladder and climb up. So, business school allowed me to accelerate that growth. So I came in as an associate manager instead of, an assistant analyst, so to speak.
Got it. Okay, good to know. Okay, Dave, let's talk about, in recent years, Toys R Us, didn't they go bankrupt in the States at some point?
Indeed, yes.
Let's talk about the
Not
future.
necessarily north of the border, which is, common misnomer, right?
Yeah, like I'm in Canada. We have Toys R Us. I have one like 15 minutes away from me. So let's talk about the future of toys here. So if I'm getting into the toy industry, am I feeling good about it? Like, is there a future? Like, I'm thinking kids will always want toys.
Kids will always want toys, and parents will always want toys for their kids. I think from that standpoint, that's difficult to stand on top of sand and say, yes, everything is rock solid, because things shift. And, a lot of people will compare the toy industry to the fashion industry because, the trends and the tastes of our consumer base can change on a dime. Even something as simple as the way we communicate with our fans. It used to be Saturday morning cartoons. Okay, you just have a commercial during a Saturday morning cartoon, and there's the reach and the frequency of your audience. Check, done. Then it was YouTube unboxing videos, and somebody's like Ryan from Ryan's Toy Reviews. That was the next iteration. You say, okay, I'm going to put, I'm going to invest over here to make sure that everybody's, understanding and reaching the audience. And now, everything is so diffuse across, so many different platforms. It's become a much more dynamic, fluid area. So the desire to buy toys is still strong. I think the challenge and the nuance that's really come into play in the last 5 or 6 years is communicating to our audience and how to reach them across platforms. Obviously, there's rightfully so a lot of safeguards in place in terms of what we can and can't do. But from a toy industry perspective, it's cyclical, and it's something that's been around for a long time. So there will be years where it's up, there will be years where it's down. The pandemic resulted in a huge boom for the toy business because, speaking as a father, I'm willing to invest in a pretty big toy if that's going to keep my kiddo occupied between the class Zooms while I'm trying to figure out my meeting cadence. And then obviously inventory and supply is always a messy thing. Again, I'll try to avoid the more tactical elements of what we do, but it's from a broad strokes perspective, the toy industry is something that has been a huge underpinning. And even when times get tough, two places where people usually don't want to pull back is spending on their kids and spending on their pets. And as a dog owner, I can confirm both of those things are true.
Right. So it's interesting. Like you just mentioned a lot of disruption. Okay, so you're talking about how Mattel's had to like adjust through different ways to reach their audience because the media is so fragmented. Back in the day, yeah, you could do that commercial and reach all those kids who love He-Man. Yeah, but nowadays it's YouTube, it's podcasts, it's everywhere. So
Absolutely.
disruption. Is there another disruption coming in terms of toys themselves, the making of toys? Is there anything like that? Or like, is AI going to do something? I don't know.
Ooh, so AI, that's a tricky one, right? So, Mattel is trying to navigate that space and understand what those guardrails are because,
Hmm.
we have best in class design teams that come into play and we want to leverage that creativity as much as possible. AI can supplement that design process, but Mattel is rightfully being very careful in that space to understand how to approach AI, and that's a conversation I would need to kick over to that team to be able to give you the
Sure.
specifics of it. But in terms of the disruption, there's a constant disruption. So there's a constant evolution. I would say whether it's something like video games coming into play or where kids are watching their content or new trends that come in that we didn't see coming. Squishmallow plush toys is something that became $1 billion brand almost overnight. And that's something that from an insights and perspective standpoint, we didn't really see coming. Then all of a sudden it's like, holy smokes, that really blew up. And so, then everybody tries to get in and understand, okay, how do we chase some of this trend down and come up with something that's meaningful to the consumer that they'll want. But yeah, from a disruption standpoint, there's always something lurking around the next corner, whether it's a new brand or a substitute. If you think of, Michael Porter is a famous business professor at Harvard Business School. And he came up with 5 forces in terms of any industry has to balance these 5 forces. And the forces are threat of substitute and threat of new entrant. And there's definitely a lot of that in toys, as we just mentioned. Threat of the buyers, threat of the suppliers. That's a little bit different in terms of changing taste to the consumer, but also how we source materials and how do we do that as sustainable as possible. It's been a challenge for Lego. Obviously Lego is its own company, but them trying to understand how do I make a sustainable brick that's not just based off of plastic. That's a challenge. And that's something that we're always looking at Mattel is how do we reduce our footprint from a sustainability standpoint? And that's a challenge for us. And then the last one is a competitive rivalry. And there's a little bit of that in toys, as I mentioned, if they let us into that layout center, we might try to nudge out another brand to make
Don't mess with us, Hasbro. Don't mess with us.
Yeah. So, and different toy manufacturers
Yeah,
excel in different areas, right? So,
sure.
Lego in the construction world, they do such an amazing job there. Kudos to them. Mattel fashion dolls and die-cast vehicles is right the bread and butter of what we do extremely well as a company. And Hasbro, board games, they have the dominant share in that category. So,
Sure.
and kudos to Jazzware for acquiring Squishmallow and being able to take a leadership position there. So, we have a balanced portfolio at Mattel. We play in a lot of different spaces, and some areas we're the leader, some areas we're a challenger. But we're always trying to try to adapt and figure out, okay, where is that disruption coming from, and how do I, if I can't capitalize on it, how do I mitigate it?
Got it. Good stuff. Dave, so listen, man, this has been a very insightful conversation. Is there any one last tip for the viewers, the listeners out there who are, embarking on their career or doing a pivot like you did? Any tip?
The thing I would go back to that we touched on earlier is, every person is going to have strengths and weaknesses. And a lot of times the temptation is, okay, let me focus on all my weaknesses so I can just become this jack of all trades, and I will become indispensable if I can do every single thing. And I would submit that a better way to look at this is, how do I make that one strength a towering strength so that that's where I really stand out from other people? And that's something that, it's some advice that I got early on in my career in marketing. And that's something that really transformed how I was able to accelerate my career. And it does two things. Number one, if I'm focusing on my strengths and relaying those to my company, then they're going to know, okay, this is how I put Dave in a position where I can get the most out of him, right? Because this is a two-way street. But also, the things that I'm really good at, chances are I enjoy doing those things. And where you can find the overlap of the Venn diagram of what your towering strengths are with what you like to do, that's going to be something where you're really going to enjoy the work that you're going to do. You're going to be good at it. And that's really going to lead to great things. So my advice is to try to understand where those, towering strengths are. And not to say you can ignore all weaknesses. I did eventually have to learn how to build a PowerPoint deck, but I'm lucky enough that we also have some producers here that can help me out if I need some custom animations. And instead, I get to do the talking, which is the part I really like.
Beautiful. Awesome, Dave. One last question. So how much was that discount on that Grayskull again?
Dave, you tell me, we can work something off on the side, but it's usually a decent discount. So, but really enjoyed having a chance to connect with you and talk through the toy industry. So can't thank you enough for the time.
That's some awesome stuff. Dave, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your story, talking about your experience at Mattel. Like, how cool is it to work at a toy company? Whenever I think, working at a toy company, I think Tom Hanks in the movie Big, when he's playing with all those toys, just testing them out in that boardroom. Like, come on, man. You get paid for that? Love it. Dave, thank you, sir. Thank you again. All right, that's it for this episode. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. Until next time, take care and have a good one.